Thanks very much. Appreciate your time today, and thank you for setting this up. As you see, I'm Isaac Hill. I'm author of the Dragon Legion, and I was excited to find out that I made it into SPFBO or SPFBOX, SPFBO 10 this year. And so I'm excited to be reading an excerpt of my novel, The Dragon Legion. So the Dragon Legion is the first in the Sunborn series, and the Sunborn series is a generational series of the Sunborn, a generational fantasy series about the Sunborn's families' rise to take back their empire that was lost in the cleansing. So I'll do a quick read of the blurb and then give you folks an overview of the series, and then I'll do a short reading. Broken generations ago in the cleansing, the Sunborn bloodline persists. Dre, the Sunborn Empire's last son, rises in the ranks of the Second Legion, a legion of criminals. Sent to quell the rebelling northern tribes, the last Sunborn son finds himself in a cruel world of politics, murder, and betrayal as he struggles to survive. Welcome to the Sunborn series, where empires rise, fall, and against all odds, rise again. The Dragon Legion is born. So, this book is the first entry in a series that was originally supposed to be a trilogy. Now it's looking more like 5 books and a novella, which is going to be coming out inside of the next 3 months. So, excuse me. I'm excited to say that I've already kind of let the cat out of the bag, that the novella is called Dre's Demise. So for all of you who are wondering how Dre Sunborn ends up in a legion of criminals, you can find that out when I release the novella, probably in September. So that's my goal. I hope to have some firm dates announced in my next newsletter. So you can find me across all socials at Isaac Hill Author. So that's on Instagram, that's the website, that's Twitter or X, whatever you call it now. All right, so without further ado, I will do a reading, give you folks a little taste of what the story's all about. Ship to port, Captain, the lookout above them shouted from the crow's nest. Aye, first mate, lower lines, Lara called out. The wind howled across the deck of the ship, the cold cutting through clothes and chilling the men of the Rolaria. Lara looked out across the deck of the small cutter. It was sleek and fast, made for darting between islands, a small fish designed to be faster than the prey she would outrun. The Rolarians had been on the sea as long as their history was recorded. They were one with the sea. Lara could remember the first time he'd set his feet on deck. He felt like he'd belonged. A lowly deck boy, now a captain of the fleet. He took a deep breath as he watched the small rowboat, a distant speck of light at first, growing larger as it grew closer in the darkness. The light bobbed up and down as it moved across the shallow bay the Rolarians had moored in. Men scurried across the deck. Lara watched as ropes flew down to the rowboat, the men below tying her up as it drew close to them. The ropes creaked, the rowboat clattering against the side of the Rolaria. Ease the lines, Lara called out before his first mate could. His first mate gave him a look of apology, to which Lara shook his head. These newcomers were obviously flat-footers, with no sense of the sea. They didn't know how much slack to give the lines. Lara knew the Rolaria could take it. The little rowboat, on the other hand, their boat would take a beating against his cutter without slack in the lines. He didn't want to rescue them when their boat began to sink. The Rolarians pulled on lines to help the passengers make the deck. The first 2 up were barrel-chested and broad-shouldered, with long, dark beards and hair braided in the Eastern fashion. Lara spotted the bulge of daggers hidden beneath their leather vests, with empty sheaths at their sides. He smiled. They underestimated him. The deal had been brokered. No weapons to be brought aboard. This slight was forgivable, but now he knew that they did not respect him and didn't think he was smart enough to spot it. The third man, much smaller than the first two, was hauled up and over the rail. He was covered in a dark cloak, black and heavy. He sported a cane, slight but well crafted. Alalera walked towards the three, swaying with the boat. The three looked to be fish out of water, hanging onto the deck, bucking the swells. Sirs, welcome aboard the Relaria. Alalera welcomed them with a bow on the deck. Captain, the third man greeted him, impatient and without a bow. What brings you here tonight? Alalera asked. The third man sneered, moving forward with his cane. Click, click, click. The man approached Alalera, coming within arm's distance of him, almost falling as the ship tilted to the port side. He steadied himself with his cane. Captain, what say you of our proposal? Alalera met the man's gaze. I took this meeting out of respect for Cassar. He has served me well as a broker in the past. You took this meeting because you're a pirate, and I offer gold for your ships. Alalera said nothing. The third man narrowed his eyes and looked around. You know the terms? Alalera nodded. I offer you gold. I need 20 ships, and I need them for a voyage across the Eastern Sea and back. What is the cargo? Alalera asked. The smaller man fixed him with a stare. Cassar agreed that the terms were no questions. Alalera nodded. You come to me because you need ships to move men, no? Cassar says cargo, but no one needs 20 ships to move cargo. They need 20 ships to move an army. Alalera's first mate took a step forward. The two Easterners did the same, their hands buried in their vests. Alalera put his hands up. Enough. We had a deal, the little man spit out. No, we agreed to meet, to hear you out, but the Relarians do not interfere with the business of Flatlanders. The little man took another step forward, towards Alalera. No questions. That was the deal. What do you care what you take across the seas? The blood you're going to spill will color the seas. We'll have no part in chumming the waters. Bloody pirate. The slight man brandished his cane as if it was a sword. Alalera spit on the deck of his ship. You insult me and bring weapons aboard my ship. We will not work with those who do not honor the terms of a deal. I offer you more gold than you can carry in your hold, and you spit on our deal? Alalera put his hands up to stay his men. The Relarians had circled the two Easterners, and now were forming a ring around Alalera and the slight man in the black coat. Leave. We'll have nothing to do with you. The man's eyes bulged, his face turning red. You'll regret this, pirate. Alalera said nothing, motioning for the man to leave, to get off his ship. The three men returned to the port side of the ship and lowered themselves over its side. The two larger men helped the slight man over and down to the rowboat and followed behind. None of the Relarians moved to help them. Cast off could be heard from down below. The Relarians pulled their lines back up on deck, coiling the ropes at the deck rail. Alalera nodded to his first mate and walked away from the main deck. Alalera was not a man of the land. He was of the sea, of the wind and the salt spray, a man of the Relarian Islands. But he knew full well what this dark man had proposed would rock the world of men and the lands from one sea to another. What of it, Captain? His first mate said quietly as they walked to the bow of the ship. Alalera let out a long breath, one he hadn't known he was holding. We're men of the seas. We do not concern ourselves with what happens on land, Alalera said to him. The first mate nodded. Aye, Captain. They watched the small rowboat push off their bow and make for the dark cove to the west. Its small torch flickered in the night, a beacon in the inky blackness. The waves rocked it to and fro, the Relaria a mirror in the swells. Alalera cursed. What is it, Captain? Alalera turned and made for the wheel of his ship. He put his hand to his mouth. Raise anchor. Make ready the mainsail. He turned to his first mate and cursed again. We should have killed that man. He will bring the pit down on all of us. It is for the Flatlanders to decide. It does not concern us, the first mate said, referring to the men on land. Ah, but war she spills to the seas, and they will turn red with the blood of that soaks the earth, Elalara said, quoting his own father. You tell the men no one speaks of this. Not in the ports, not in their lovers' arms, not a word. Elalara gave his first mate a look. He needed him to understand that they were playing with fire. Zufir, save us, the first mate whispered to himself. The cutter began to move in the night. The anchor pulled out of her prison at the sea's floor, the ship rolling as she cut through the surf, provided comfort to Elalara. The sea's winds blew in his face, breathing life into his sails. So that's the prologue. Moving on to chapter 1. Dre, the jailer called down this damp stone hall. Dre stood with his arm resting on the bars of his cell door, hands hanging into the prison hallway. His jailer liked to bat at Dre's arms, trying to catch them with his club as he made his rounds. It was a game they played. Dre's head bowed down as he tried to stop the world from spinning. The cell's iron bars were the only place that Dre could rest to keep from puking. His eyes kept closed to keep the world straight, from painting the floors with his guts. The rest of the cell was the hard granite stone of the mountains around them, cold, unforgiving. Dre grunted, his mouth dried of saliva. His stomach turned over as he grunted. The jailer was whistling, the tune not quite carrying down the stone hallway. Its sounds mixed with the sputtering of torches in the early dawn light. Sunlight hit his back, warming him from the one window high in his cell. Excuse me. The heat made his nausea all the worse. Footsteps echoed down the hall, and their cadence told Dre he'd screwed up royally. He could hear the cane tapping along with each footfall. Click, click, click. Each step conveyed annoyance. He'd hear about this. No hiding his long night out. Dre shook his head as if it would banish the hangover he felt. Dre. The voice dripped with frustration, contempt. Ellis. I should have known they'd send you. Dre almost barked the words, his mouth dry. Ellis scoffed. They? No, he sent me. He sent his errand boy, did he? Dre's knuckles turned white as he gripped the bars of the cell. I'm your father's advisor, not an errand boy, your highness, Ellis said loudly. Gray grunted. His head was already splitting from his headache. Shut up and leave me be. Ellis paced back and forth in front of Dre's cell. You shouldn't be in here. All you have to do is tell them who you are. I'm Dre, a man of the 2nd Legion. Ellis walked the length of his cell, his cane tapping at each bar, the noise reverberating in Dre's skull. He's not going to be happy. First, you spur his requests, then you go and join the Legion. Dre considered, rubbing at his temples. I know what I am, and so does he. I joined the 2nd. They are my family now. Boy, you are royal blood. A fight outside of a pub is no reason for you to be in here. Ellis looked around the prison cells, as if they might absorb him. Dre laughed. I'm in the 2nd, because they only take criminals. I am what I am. Ellis sighed, shaking his head. You've been summoned to the palace. Dre peered at Ellis, shaking his head. Well, he can go to the pit. I won't be there. The last time I went to the palace, I almost killed him. The corner of Ellis's mouth raised in what Dre thought was a smile. I told him as much, but nonetheless, you owe him your fealty. Ellis's eyes narrowed, appraising Dre. It's about your little one, the one you seem to have forgotten to mention. Ellis wagged his cane back and forth. Tisk, tisk. What the pit are you talking about? Ellis laughed. Oh, this is perfect. You didn't know? Dre sighed again. His head was a mess. The anger rose in him like a bile, his meaty fists gripping the bars as a lifeline. He could feel blood rising in his face. He wanted to strike out at Ellis, to rip his throat out. He settled for less. Mess off, Ellis. He watched with some satisfaction as Ellis took a sharp breath at the anger radiating off of Dre. Ellis said nothing as he walked away, his mouth a tight line. Dre knew what he'd have to do now. He'd made it worse for himself. He knew as soon as the words left his mouth. Ellis didn't speak for himself. He spoke for others, and he'd be relaying the message. He knew he'd have to go see her if what Ellis said was true. He hoped to Zufir it wasn't. See you again soon, the jailer said, shoving Dre out of the prison gates and into the dawn sunlight. Dre righted himself, almost falling over. He swung around, his fist bunched, but the jailer had closed the iron gates to the prison. The jailer gave a wave with each finger. Dre took a step forward and then thought better of it, as he had to close his eyes. The world spun. All the jailer knew was that he'd been given a pass, not who he was, just a man of the second who had been freed after a fight with the guards. Pit. Dre rubbed at his face again. His mouth felt like dry smoke. Dre squinted at the sunlight, peeking over the Karlok Mountains, the stone that built many of the buildings around him, the walls of the city he was in, and the palace of the nation of Landor. The jagged white peaks still made him shiver. Even years after his training in the army, the troops of Landor's army trained in the mountains, fighting each other in imaginary wars. Sometimes men died, but mostly they got hurt, fell from peaks, or just lost toes and fingers to the frostbite. Dre squeezed his right hand. It still tingled where it had turned a waxy white in the early morning of his last day up there. His beard had been a sheet of icicles hanging from his face, his breath steaming as it had issued from his mouth. His squad had hidden in the drifts at night, waiting for dawn to ambush the last enemy squad. Excuse me. Excuse me again, sorry. He'd known the pain was going to be bad, but not how bad until they found one of his men dead from the evening in the snow. He'd known regret then anger for the generals that made them play their games. The jailer had known Ellis was someone, or he was working for somebody who was above his station. What Dre had to do with it, he was sure to wonder. Dre was on the main road of Landor's main city now. He could see the palace in the distance, its walls and towers seeming to rise out of the base of the Karlok Mountains. The stones cut from the granite walls were not far from the mountains, blending in with the peaks. Flags of Landor and her king snapped in the wind. Even from a distance, Dre recognized the white peaks on the gray background and a sun between them. Look who's alive, a lazy voice called out from behind him. Dre turned on the cobblestone, narrowly missing a passing cart. The driver gave him a rude gesture and a grunt. Pit, it is good to see you, Hamel. I thought you were a goner after the big lad from the past took a swing at you. Dre clapped his friend on the back, and they began to walk. The route from the prison to home was one they both knew. Hamel laughed and returned to the gesture. He looked around, his eyes taking in the people. He said lower, so that only they could hear. Ellis was back, looking for you this morning. Dre nodded to him. Aye, he found his way to me. Hamel chuckled. I'd guessed you were held up by pressing matters after your little show with the guards last night? You know I hate them. They've been at the 2nd Legion for years. I just wanted to show the captain of the guard the error of his ways. Dre gave his friend a dark smile. I know they must hate how they put us in the dungeon, only to salute us now. Hamel laughed out loud, the laugh echoing on the empty streets. I just decided he needed a little reminder of who the second are. Dre put his hands on his knees, breathing in the cool air. Gods, I shouldn't have drunk that much ale. I'll stop it there. That is most of the way through the first chapter. It's the full prologue as well. So the second legion is a legion of criminals, and you're getting a little taste of the camaraderie that comes with that legion. And thank you very much. I really appreciate that. So the second legion is the Dragon Legion is available on Amazon, paperback, hardback, ebook. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. And if you want more information about the Sunborn series, you can visit my website at isaachill.author.com, my Instagram, isaachillauthor, and my Twitter/X, isaachillauthor, surprisingly enough. And if you sign up for my newsletter, I will be getting the prequel novella out, Dre's Demise, sometime in September. And that will be free, of course, in electronic version. So that's it for me. I really appreciate your time today, and hope you enjoyed the Dragon Legion.